No one really tells you this, but I will. There are moments when heaven feels deliberately silent. You pray, cry out, fast, and the answer, nothing. And what's worse, everything starts to fall apart. Bills pile up, people disappear, emotions get tangled. Your mind screams, your heart sinks, and you begin to wonder if faith is even worth it. But what if I told you that all of this chaos, this silence, this disorder, is actually God's plan to teach you how to truly trust? Sounds crazy, doesn't it? But the truth is, trusting is easy when everything is going well. Trusting when your bank account is full, your prayers are answered, and there's peace at home. Anyone can do that. The real test of faith begins when none of that is happening. And that's where the Bible's most radical teaching comes in. God doesn't just want you to believe in Him, He wants you to depend on Him. And dependency is not learned in comfort, it's born in emptiness, in loss, in absence, in prayers that echo back in silence. What you call a hard season, heaven may be calling a training ground, because God isn't punishing you, He's shaping you. And to shape you, He has to expose the cracks, break old beliefs, touch wounds you thought had healed. But all of this is done out of love, because Jesus didn't come to give you an easy life. He came to give you unshakable faith. And that doesn't grow in the good days. It's forged in the fire, when you understand nothing, yet still choose to stay. And that's exactly what this message is about, to remind you that God hasn't abandoned you. He's simply teaching you to trust what you cannot yet see. You are not being rejected, you are being prepared. And this moment that feels like the end may be the exact place where everything is about to begin, but only if you understand what heaven is building inside of you. So let's talk about it now. There are days when the soul feels so compressed inside that even the body seems to shrink. And it's no use saying it's just a phase or this too shall pass, because those who feel the weight know it hurts now. When someone hears the phrase, "I've sowed love my whole life only to receive ingratitude," they don't just hear a complaint, they relive moments. Instances when they gave their best but received silence. Moments when they reached out with open hands but had their hearts ignored. And it's in this invisible field of pain that real prayer is. Most needed, not fancy words, but deep surrender. The truth is, often the ones who talk the most about God are the ones feeling most forgotten by Him. It's painful to admit, but it's real. Religion doesn't always embrace those who are bleeding in silence. Some people help everyone around them, pray for others, share verses from the Bible, but deep down, they're drowning without rescue. It feels like being stranded in the middle of the sea, clinging to promises, while the winds keep blowing against you. And in those moments, what the heart needs most isn't another sermon, it's a shoulder to lean on. Jesus, who was love in human form, was also betrayed. He too was pushed aside by those who once claimed to stand by Him. When we look at the cross, we don't just see sacrifice, we see a pain that understands ours. And that should remind us that suffering isn't a sign of weak faith. On the contrary, real faith is the kind that endures even when everything seems wrong. It's when the soul falls to its knees without strength and still whispers, "God, I'm still here, even if I don't understand." The kind of empathy that sets people free isn't the one that says it'll be okay, but the one that looks you in the eye and says, "I've been there too." That's the kind of connection Jesus made. He didn't offer quick answers, He walked alongside. Those who truly believe in the Bible know that the greatest miracles came after the greatest losses. Lazarus was only raised after deep weeping. The storm only ceased after the disciples' panic, and it's right there, in the curve of chaos, that heaven begins to move. So when everything goes wrong, maybe it's not time to ask why, but to ask what for. That shift in focus won't fix the problem instantly, but it starts to heal the soul. Because what distances someone from God isn't doubt, it's guilt. guilt for feeling pain even while believing. And that's where the turning point begins. When someone realizes that even in pain, God is teaching, that even in his silence, he's still moving, and this is only the beginning of something far greater. It's astonishing how life has the power to wound us exactly in the places we try to guard most. It's not strangers who hurt us the worst. It's the ones closest to us. The deepest pain doesn't come from enemies, but from friends who turn their backs, family members who judge, or love that betrays. And those who've lived this know. There's pain that doesn't scream, but slowly consumes. In those moments, prayer becomes a groan, and faith shrinks to a fragile voice inside the chest, begging for one more breath of strength. When someone speaks of ingratitude, they're talking about a soul that's been bruised, because we've all had those seasons when we gave our all and received crumbs in return. And just when we needed heaven to speak, it felt like heaven shut down. Your heart breaks from trusting the wrong people, from believing that kindness would come back doubled, yet sometimes it returns as heartbreak. And it's not easy to admit that you've prayed for people who forgot you, reached out your hand only to feel the weight of abandonment. But the Bible shows us Jesus himself was abandoned too. Feeling all of this isn't weakness, it's humanity. Religion often teaches us to be strong all the time, but even the psalmists wept. David, a man after God's own heart, wrote laments that still echo in our own tears. He cried, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" And that cry wasn't just his, it belongs to all who believe, and yet find themselves surrounded by silence. Knowing that the Bible embraces this kind of pain brings a relief that few are brave enough to admit. Betrayal leaves scars we try to cover with spiritual cliches. But you can't patch a soul with loose verses. Living the gospel truthfully means naming your pain, facing your ghosts, and confessing what still bleeds. In this season, faith isn't about victory, it's about survival. And only those who've survived truly understand how much it costs to keep praying, even with a disillusioned heart, even with shattered hope. And yet somehow, you pray. These wounds aren't signs of spiritual failure, they're signs that you're still alive. And to feel is to live. Even when everything seems to fall apart, faith is still there, even if trembling. Maybe the answer isn't to silence the pain, but to learn how to walk with it, because it's in the middle of those wounds that a new understanding starts to grow. And the seeds you planted in tears may be the flowers of the next season. What you sow doesn't always bloom when you expect it to. And it's precisely at that point that many give up, thinking God never saw their planting. But the Bible is clear, whatever a person sows, they will also reap. The catch is that this harvest rarely arrives on the timeline we set or in the faces we hoped for. Sometimes, the love you gave returns in a different form, in an unexpected hug, an opportunity that appears out of nowhere, a quiet care that only God knows how to orchestrate. There are seasons when everything feels like loss. You sow kindness, loyalty, generosity, and what do you get back? Rejection, silence, disregard. But heaven has a memory that humans don't. God hasn't forgotten the good you did when no one applauded. And the most mysterious thing is that at the most improbable moment, the seeds begin to sprout, not because someone gave you credit, but because divine justice never fails. That's when the turnaround begins, in the unseen, while you think you're alone. Some people are harvesting today what you planted years ago. And maybe you can't see it with your natural eyes, but the spiritual realm is already moving. That's why your faith must stay alive, even when the ground looks barren. Prayer, in this context, is the most revolutionary act of someone who hasn't surrendered. It's like watering the soil even when you don't see the plant. It's just like Jesus taught. The kingdom of God is like a seed that grows even when the sower doesn't know how. And do you know what's most beautiful? when the harvest comes with restoration. What you lacked, God returns in abundance, and not only in material things, but with peace, with dignity, with restored joy. Sometimes a peaceful heart is worth more than 1,000 standing ovations. And when your soul is at peace with God, even what seems small becomes a miracle. Religion might not value your journey, but heaven has never ignored a single step you took or the days you cried out to God in secret. So don't give up on the good you've planted, even if no one sees it, even if everything feels unfair. The harvest doesn't fail, because the God who sees in secret also rewards in secret and in public when the time is right. The turning point doesn't begin with applause, but with perseverance. And maybe that's your sign. Your harvest might be closer than you think, but before it arrives, there's still something inside you that needs to be revisited. After so much pain and waiting, there comes a moment when the soul needs more than promises. It needs direction. It's not enough to know that God is in control. You must know what to do with what's left after the storm. That's where revisiting your context comes in. Not to blame yourself, but to understand yourself. It's time to look inward, with honesty, and ask, was everything I lived really just injustice? Or did I stay silent when I should have set boundaries? The most powerful prayers sometimes aren't the ones that ask, but the ones that listen. Reevaluating your actions is like clearing the soil of your soul. Maybe you gave too much of yourself, or maybe you let fear decide for you. The Bible says the human heart is deceitful. That's why stopping and doing honest self-analysis is deeply spiritual. You can do this with something as simple as a journal. Take a notebook and write what you've learned from the pain, what you do differently, and which behaviors you now realize need to change. That's a kind of silent, written prayer, one that transforms. Another practice that brings deep healing is forgiveness. Not the automatic kind you speak just to seem spiritual. I mean the kind that rips through pride, brings tears, and births healing. Writing a letter to someone who hurt you, even if you never send it, is a powerful place to start. Jesus taught us to forgive 70 times 7, not as math, but as a way of life. And religion without forgiveness turns into a burden, not freedom. You must release others to set yourself free. Learning from your own mistakes is also essential. If you played a part in what happened, acknowledge it without diminishing your worth. Spiritual maturity means understanding that God doesn't condemn us. He lovingly corrects us. Prayer here isn't just a request, it's a conversation. Father, show me where I went wrong. Help me not to repeat what destroyed me. If you walk with Jesus, you're meant to grow to look more like him, and that includes recognizing the areas still in need of change. Real faith moves us to transform. Finally, use your pain as a compass. What hurt you can show you what to protect. What exhausted you can teach you where to set boundaries. What you lost can reveal what truly matters. All of this is part of living with God. The Bible is full of people who reevaluated their path after pain. Joseph, Elijah, Paul, they all went through revision before mission. And maybe what you need now isn't a new miracle, but a different decision. And the journey keeps going. Resilience isn't just about enduring pain. It's about continuing, even when you don't know if things will ever get better. It's having faith when all the signs say the opposite. Religion teaches about miracles, but it rarely prepares you for the waiting room. And that's the most dangerous place, because it's where the mind screams, doubt creeps in, and fatigue takes over. It's that in-between space, between the promise and the fulfillment, where most people give up. But those who truly pray, even without seeing a way out, are quietly shielding themselves with something the world can't explain. Hope. Waiting doesn't mean being passive. It means keeping your heart in motion. Keep sowing, even if there's no harvest. Keep serving, even if no one notices. Keep believing, even when nothing around you changes. The Bible is filled with stories like this. Noah built an ark with no rain in sight. Abraham waited for a child that defied all logic. Hannah prayed for years with no answer, and they were remembered not because they rushed, but because they stayed. Resilience is the altar where faith proves itself without applause, but no one stays resilient alone. That's why Jesus sent the disciples out 2 by 2. That's why we need people who won't give up on us. If you're going through a painful moment, find someone trustworthy. Talk, pray together, share your journey. The strength you need might come through something as simple as, "I'm here for you." And don't underestimate small steps, taking a shower, making your bed, reading a psalm out loud. These little actions keep the spirit upright, even when the body is exhausted. Prayer during this season takes on a different shape. It's no longer about asking God to change everything at once. It's about asking Him to change what's still under construction within you. Sometimes the miracle isn't a door opening, it's your heart staying open. Religion might pressure you to look strong, but real faith carries you even when you feel weak. It's in the soul's lowest places that the grace of God finds room to work. And sometimes that ground is the only thing saving you from a pride that would have pulled you away from Him. Active resilience is a form of worship. It's getting up every morning and saying, "Jesus, I'm still here," even when you're tired, even when you're unmotivated, even when you feel broken. Heaven responds more to posture than desperation. And maybe what you're calling failure is actually the foundation of a brand new beginning. But before you restart with wisdom, you need to understand what to do with the now. There comes a point on the journey where you can no longer just endure. You have to transform. And this transformation doesn't come from magic or a quick fix. It begins with the brave decision to stop running from pain and face what needs to change. Faith wasn't made just to help you take blows, but to mold you through them. The gospel of Jesus is not about fixing your life without effort. It's about letting God rebuild your soul piece by piece, even while you still feel like you're falling apart. Embracing your current season, no matter how painful, is the first step out of the place where your soul has gotten stuck. It's not about pretending everything is fine or repeating shallow religious catchphrases. It's about looking in the mirror and saying, "I'm not who I was, and I'm still not who I need to be." And somewhere in that middle space, God begins to reveal Himself. Not through lightning bolts, but in the details, in the strength to get up, in the peace that appears in chaos, in the quiet certainty that rises from nowhere. That's real faith in motion. The kind of transformation that comes from God doesn't erase your history, it redeems it. He uses even your mistakes as tools. Even your trauma becomes a stepping stone. The Bible is filled with people who only bloomed after they broke. Peter denied Jesus, yet helped launch the church. Moses fled Egypt, but came back to lead his people. Rahab was a prostitute, yet became part of Jesus' lineage. That's what redemption looks like. And if God did it with them, why wouldn't He do it with you? Heaven never rejects a heart that is humbly willing to begin again. But make no mistake, transformation hurts. It requires you to let go of old habits, to forgive the people you said you never would, to stop justifying your own patterns. Some people pray for a new season, but cling to old behaviors. Jesus didn't heal just to soothe, He healed to set free, and freedom demands responsibility. If you want to live the new life God has for you, you need to leave the past where it belongs. And that's more than just emotion, it's a decision. That's why a fresh start is for the courageous. To be transformed is to walk in awareness. It's saying yes to a future you can't yet see, but that God has already prepared. It's trusting that what's being built in you today is the foundation for what He will soon place in your hands. And what He gives isn't based on merit, but on faith. The kind of prayer that transforms, says, Lord, change me on the inside before you change anything on the outside. And maybe now, it's no longer about fighting, but finally beginning to heal. One of the greatest lies your mind tries to tell you in difficult times is that feeling pain makes you weak. That admitting sadness means a lack of faith, that showing weariness is a sign you haven't prayed enough. But the Bible doesn't hide the tears of God's people. On the contrary, it records them as testimonies. Job questioned. Elijah isolated himself. Jeremiah wept. And Jesus sweated blood in Gethsemane. The Son of God himself showed that feeling is part of the journey, and if he felt, why should we try to silence what hurts us? Validating your pain isn't the same as drowning in it. It's about acknowledging that it exists and giving a name to what's burning inside. There's no healing without diagnosis, and those who mask their emotions with religious phrases may look strong on the outside, but inside, they're only delaying collapse. Honest prayer begins when we stop trying to impress God with pretty words and start speaking to him as a child speaks to a father. Real faith doesn't erase emotions, it carries them. It holds your hand, even when you whisper, God, I'm not okay today. There's a difference between feeding your pain and embracing it. Feeding it means reliving the hurt daily, like a punishment that never ends. Embracing it means sitting with your pain, listening to what it has to teach, and asking, what are you here to show me? That's a spiritual practice, not just psychological. Embracing your pain is an act of faith, because it means you're trusting that even what hurt you can be used by God to reveal something deeper. Religion often tells you to pray more, but true spiritual growth teaches you to listen more, especially to yourself. Here's what you must remember. Pain does not define you. It shapes you, yes, but it is not your identity. What you're feeling today may stem from deep losses, but it can also be the soil where fruits of wisdom, empathy, and spiritual maturity begin to grow. Faith is like a seed planted in cracked ground. It may take time, but when it grows, it transforms everything around it. Jesus never turned his face from those in pain, and he's not starting now. Heaven never despises the wounded. It only refuses to let them get lost in their pain. And once you begin to treat your pain with reverence rather than rejection, something within you begins to shift. Prayer becomes more honest, God's presence feels more intimate, and transformation is no longer something you chase. It becomes a natural outcome. Healing begins the moment your soul understands it is not being judged, but deeply loved. And maybe your next step after embracing your pain is to start transforming the way you see your entire process. When everything falls apart, your first instinct is to believe it was all for nothing. Your mind starts whispering, if it had worked out, it was God's will, but since it failed, it must not have been. But that logic is shallow, and spiritual life is far too deep to fit into such easy answers. Not every loss is rejection. Not every silence is abandonment. Sometimes what looks like delay is actually protection. The Bible shows this over and over again. God didn't keep Daniel's friends from the fire. He walked with them inside it. And that's the kind of faith that must be born when everything else fails. Reconstructing your expectations means taking a step back and asking, what exactly was I hoping for, and why? Sometimes the problem isn't the dream itself, but your attachment to how it should unfold. God never promised to control the scenery. He promised to be present in it. Mature faith learns to release the details of the plan without letting go of the promise. Because true prayer doesn't demand a script. It trusts the author of the story. And here's the irony. The more you let go, the more room God has to move. There are seasons when you don't need new answers. You need a new way to ask the question. It's no longer about when will it happen, but Lord, prepare me for what's coming. That changes everything. Anxiety turns into peace. control turns into surrender. Rebuilding expectations is a spiritual decision rooted in wisdom. You stop trying to convince God of your plan and start listening for what He wants to reveal. And the most beautiful part, Jesus has walked this path. He also laid down His own will to embrace the Father's. But be careful, rebuilding expectations doesn't mean settling. It means aligning your heart with heaven. Maybe religion taught you not to ask questions, but healthy faith is full of conversation. God isn't offended by sincere questions. He draws near to hearts that are open. And the more you allow yourself to be shaped, the clearer the road becomes. It's as if heaven is whispering, "I haven't ignored what you want. I've been working to give you what you truly need." And when that shift happens, something new is born inside. Hope stops being loud and starts being steady. Peace no longer depends on good news. It begins to bloom in cloudy days. You learn to walk by faith, not by sight. The Bible becomes a daily companion, not just a lifeline. Prayer becomes a conversation with a friend, not just a ritual of desperation. And in that process, your heart is already preparing to understand a spiritual law that changes everything, the cycle of sowing and reaping. There's a spiritual truth many have heard but few truly understand. Everything in life follows a cycle, including faith. What you plant sooner or later will grow. But that later is exactly where many people get stuck. The Bible is clear, whatever a man sows that he will also reap. But it doesn't say when. The process is invisible, like a seed buried underground, working in a place you can't see, including within yourself. And trusting in that unseen process is one of the greatest acts of faith. The problem is, we live in a culture obsessed with immediate results, and that even affects how we relate to God. We want to pray today and receive the answer tomorrow. We fast one day and expect miracles the next. But faith doesn't function like a vending machine. It's a relationship with God, and relationships take time, listening, and patience. Those who treat religion like a transactional contract end up disillusioned, but those who see the kingdom as a field stay faithful even when the heavens seem silent. The harvest is fair, but it arrives at the right time, not our time, and sometimes it comes through unexpected doors. You might sow kindness into a co-worker and reap open doors in a completely different area. You pray for someone's salvation, and in the process, God transforms your own heart. That's Jesus showing us. Nothing done in faith is wasted. Not a single tear, not a single act, not a single prayer. Everything is counted, everything is gathered, everything is sown in the soil of eternity. But here's a word of caution. Not every harvest comes from intentional seeds. Some are reaping confusion because they sowed in haste. Others are harvesting exhaustion because they sowed into unprepared soil. And recognizing that is spiritual too. Because God doesn't punish, He teaches. And sometimes He lets us see the consequences, not to shame us, but to awaken us to change. That's why self-evaluation, confession, and the willingness to grow are deeply rooted in the Bible. Understanding the sowing and reaping cycle brings freedom. It removes the pressure of urgency, but places the responsibility of persistence. Your harvest isn't about luck, it's about perseverance, silent faith, relentless prayer, trusting even when you no longer feel anything. And once this understanding takes root in your heart, it creates a new level of commitment to your life. That's when practical tools emerge, those small daily habits that anchor your faith even on the most ordinary days. Now let me ask you this. How much longer will you keep blaming yourself for not understanding what you're going through? When will you finally accept that God is in control, even when everything around you looks like chaos? Maybe you've been waiting for things to change on the outside, but what heaven is really transforming is on the inside. That harvest you've been crying out for might have already begun. just not in the areas your natural eyes are looking at. And perhaps the most powerful lesson right now isn't changing your circumstances, but changing how you move within them. What if, in the end, this pain you're facing is the very womb where God is birthing your greatest transformation? Have you considered that trusting Jesus for real requires exactly these moments of total disarray? Because this is when faith stops being just a message and becomes your way of life. This is when prayer becomes nourishment, not just a request. This is when the Bible becomes a compass, not just a book you pick up in desperation. What God is building in you is far greater than what you can imagine right now. So take a moment to reflect. What do you need to let go of today so you can finally start trusting for real? What habits, thoughts, or expectations do you need to hand over to God with genuine surrender? Faith only deepens through surrender, and God isn't demanding perfection from you. He just wants your yes, even if it's shaky, even if it's broken. Heaven moves by faith, not by force. And if you made it this far, it means something inside you is already changing. If this message spoke to your heart, go ahead and like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave a comment below saying, "I choose to trust, even without understanding," and express your faith. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you can keep receiving words that build your soul every day. There's a new video here daily, and I'll see you in the next one with more faith, more depth, and more answers from above.